Hey, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman. This is part two of my conversation with Coley about flag theory. In part one, we talked about why Coley moved to Panama. We talked about some of the reasons that drove him out of the U.S., how he wanted to implement this flag theory to diversify from sovereign risk. In other words, the risk of the U.S. government going crazy. Part two, we're going to talk more about banking. We're going to talk about taxes and the one asset the IRS has a hard time coming after. And of course, the benefits of starting an offshore company and how that can save you a lot of money in the long run. So I hope you enjoy part two of my conversation with Coley.
The important caveat, though, or the important thing to consider is that's not Panama's fault. That's the U.S.'s fault because the U.S. is requiring Panamanian banks to scrutinize any deposits that come from U.S. citizens. And so I don't fault Panama for it.
Right.
There was legislation passed, I think it was in 2017, called FATCA. FATCA is the acronym. It's FATCA, and it's the Foreign Assets Transfer and Control Act. And that's really, where the problem lies, is that the U.S. passed a law that requires all of these banks in other countries to, give their residents, their U.S. residents, a proctology anytime they want to wire money into their banks. So it's not Panama's fault. So that's something that you have to deal with as well.
So when you're transferring it and they ask the questions, how much do they follow up? Like if you say, "Oh, I'm transferring $200,000 because I'm going to buy a property," do they actually track that? Like, how much proof do you need? I'm just wondering if somebody were unscrupulous and trying to game the system a little bit.
Well, so we built a house on a beautiful beach here back in 2015, and so we were constantly transferring funds into our account to pay for the construction. And so we do 40,000 at a time, and 20,000 at a time, and I'd get a call from the bank every time, and generally, if I recall, we had to provide some documentation sometimes that showed, this is for the electrician to wire the house or whatever. So we just send them the invoices, and they'd be fine with it.
Then once you have the money inside the country, or if you earn money inside the country, because every time, like if I were to deposit $10,000 cash in an American bank, I have to fill out paperwork for it every time. So there's so much scrutiny on your money here. When you're within the system there, do you have more privacy or less, or they're about the same?
I unfortunately, I think it's about the same. But again, I would add, it's the long arm of U.S. regulation hits Panama as well. There's very few places in the world that it doesn't hit anymore. Right. And so it's not the Panamanian banks left to their own devices, I don't think would really care. But they're now subject to a lot of scrutiny by the US. They're part of the SWIFT system. They can be sanctioned there and cut off, or it's a real mess. But again, it's not. I don't fault Panama for it.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I fault the U.S. for a lot of the problems around the world. I'm just wondering, I guess kind of that question goes back to, if you have the flag theory of you want your assets in different places, you want to set up bankings. If it's the same system at the end of the day, what's the point of the flag? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's a good question. On the banking side, I think they're probably used, excuse me, they're used to be more of a benefit until the U.S. started passing a lot of these laws that that really scrutinized banks in foreign countries. So it's probably fair to say, there may be some marginal benefit, but not a huge benefit. Where there is a big benefit is physical assets. So the way I've always looked at it is, I have real estate. I have a lot of real estate holdings here in Panama. I have a condominium. I've got a house. I've got some farmland. Got an organic farm. Things like that. And some of that I actually hold in my retirement account. I set up a self-directed IRA, which anyone can do, which self-employed people can do rather, that gives me all sorts of freedom to invest in a lot of different things besides U.S. equities and bonds and things like that. And so I bought an organic farm here in Panama using some retirement funds. And when I did it, a friend of mine who also has a self-directed IRA had kind of coached me before, and he said, you can buy as many physical assets as you want with your self-directed IRA, your retirement account. And if you think about the low-hanging fruit that that the IRS or the U.S. government could try and seize, they're going to go after that low-hanging fruit before they're going to try and track down a real estate or an organic farm in Panama.
Right.
So from a physical asset standpoint, I've really tried to maximize my physical assets here because I think it's just exceedingly unlikely that they're ever going to show up on the radar screen of the U.S. government. And I will tell you, I play by all the rules. I file everything I need to file. I put it all on my tax return. I'm not trying to hide anything. But the fact that my physical assets are here in Panama versus the U.S. gives me a higher degree of comfort than if they were sitting somewhere in the U.S.
So what's the tax situation on land in Panama? Because I'm dealing with, I have a bunch of property up in the mountains, a number of different lots. And apparently I didn't pay the right taxes on one of them. And I just got a letter from the county saying they're going to sell it off if I don't pay it or they have the option of selling it off if I don't pay it in 30 days, which is ridiculous because whatever. I owned it outright. And now because of a tax bill, they technically own it. It's infuriating. But so what are the tax laws in Panama as far as property taxes?
I don't know exactly. What I can tell you is that, let's say you came down here with, say, $250,000 and you were looking to buy a condominium, and you wanted to be on the beach, outside of Panama City, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. I wouldn't say most, a lot of the developments, when you're purchasing real estate, they will have a 15, 20-year tax holiday. So you're not paying property taxes for and this is primarily for new construction, I'll add.
Okay.
But, if you buy a new condominium in a new development, a lot of times they will have a 15 to 20-year tax holiday, so that you're essentially, you're not paying any taxes for 15 years. The way it works upon sale is that's upon the sale of the property, that's when you pay the tax bill. So whatever you owe upon sale of the asset is when you pay the taxes. In fact, we just checked to see what we needed to pay in taxes on our condominium here in Buenaventura. This is a condominium that my spouse and I own together, and we, we'll split it when we split. But we talked to our lawyer. Lawyer emailed us back and said, "Yeah, you owe 35 cents." So we will have a tax bill. We will have a tax liability when we sell, but we don't have anything right now.
Yeah, that's nice. So the taxes aren't crazy. I guess the smaller government needs smaller taxes. They don't have a military that has bases in every country around the world. They're not funding wars in Ukraine. So your taxes are generally going to be lower.
That's right. And that gets to kind of the one of the other flags, which is establishing an offshore company. The write-offs that you can take for an offshore company here or for a company here in Panama versus the write-offs that you could take in the U.S., they're much more generous here. And so, a lot of the folks that establish offshore companies will do so because it's very tax beneficial from what you can actually write off here. They're just much more generous in the types of things you can write off: meals and entertainment and vehicles and travel and things like that. Those are big benefits as well. So that's a pretty interesting flag. That's one where it gets, particularly when you're dealing with multiple tax jurisdictions, it can get really complicated, and it's one you need a good lawyer to kind of figure out how to optimize what you can do. But there's lots of benefits to doing it.
So we've talked about setting up businesses and, transferring all this money. From what I've looked on online, most of the people that are doing the flag theory seem to be, I don't know, well off, I guess, financially. Is this like a rich person's game? Or, if somebody's just coming up, they're like 30 years old, they have maybe a 6-figure salary, but they're not millionaires yet. Is this something they should start thinking about? Is it something, or is it just once you have some money in the bank, you need to start diversifying the risk?
Well, so another good question. And I've always thought that, the super elites that have the family offices and the, teams of lawyers that can help them figure out how to maximize things like citizenship and residency and tax jurisdictions and things like that. The truth is, we can use the same we can use the same strategies they use. So I don't think you do need to be a millionaire. When we did this in 2006, I was much younger. I was still making pretty good money, but we started putting these things in place when I didn't have the assets that I have today. As you grow and as you get older and you make more money and things like that, you'll be glad you did it. And so we did it almost by mistake. We started looking into it and kind of fell into it and got really interested in it. But these are all things that are serving me very well now, 10 years later. And my view is, regular Joes should be looking to take advantage of the same sorts of strategies that the billionaires and the Davos crew use for themselves. I mean, Eric Schmidt, I think the former CEO of Google, has got residency in 2 or 3 different countries. I think Elon Musk was looking to do the same thing. Peter Thiel, I think, is a resident of New Zealand. I mean, these guys are all implementing various aspects of the 5 or the 7 flag strategy. And, there's nothing preventing us from doing it too, maybe in more of a limited scale, but it's a very useful thing to do, I think.
Yeah, it's a nice base to build from. If you're not that set up, it seems like, well, first of all, reducing your tax burden. If you can save, I don't know, if you're living in like New York now and you move to Panama and you're saving, even if on a 6-figure salary, you're probably saving 10, 15 grand a year at $100,000 by getting rid of state taxes. And you've diversified your, your location risk. You've diversified a lot of different things. You have a place to go if, it's the van here.
Yeah. And you also have the opportunity to invest in, lots of things that would be more difficult if you were in the U.S. Foreign equities, for instance, foreign real estate. I guess the other interesting thing that is evolving now is this, and I think it was a consequence largely of COVID, but I think it's here to stay, is the whole idea of remote work. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to, I don't think you really want to pursue a flag strategy unless, you're willing to live overseas. It doesn't make any sense if you want to stay in Denver, Colorado, or someplace like that. It just doesn't. You have to want to live overseas, and for it to really be useful. But with the way remote work has exploded, all my clients are in the U.S. and I travel back there for work quite a bit. But I can do, my day job, sitting here in front of my computer from anywhere. And so why not do it in a place that, where I can have residency, where I can start diversifying, where I can start taking advantage of these flags, and do it that way. It just makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah. So how much do you take your kids back to the US a lot, or are they mostly being raised in or staying in Panama?
So my kids were raised in Panama. In fact, we started the school that my kids went to.
Oh,
Yeah. So that, the education, that's another thing you got to consider. If you have kids, the education system here, and it's the case in a lot of developing countries, is not very good. And so my wife started a school for our three kids, and it's now grown to 115, 120 kids, I think, and from like 30, 35 different countries. And the benefit of that was we controlled the curriculum. We didn't need to worry about all of the woke nonsense. Um, and it was a great big experiment. We didn't actually know how it would turn out, but my son is now at UNC Chapel Hill and my daughter's at Michigan. So it worked. They got a fantastic education and they're now in top-notch schools in the US. And then I've got an 11-year-old that's still coming up, and so she'll be down here too. But they're all fluent in Spanish. They have more, I think most importantly, they have kind of an international mindset. They are not tied to the US at all, really. Most of their friends in school are from, Latin America or Europe or places like that. And so I think it's what we always told them growing up is, given the uncertainty of the world right now, you got to be very nimble and you got to be ready to turn on a dime. And you guys are going to have a distinct advantage over your peers that have never traveled outside of the U.S. because you can pick up and go, and you can take advantage. You can build your own five flag situation because you've already lived it, and I think that's a gift that we've given them.
yeah, that sounds like an amazing gift to give kids. Well, the international perspective, first of all, getting them out of the US education system, which breaks so many kids' minds so early, is a great thing to do. But also having extra language, extra cultural awareness, realizing that America isn't the center of the universe, which so many people in America, they never leave their state. So you have this very United States centric view that just distorts the way you view international relations. It distorts the way you view business, everything. So like having that kids with that perspective seems amazing to me. What has changed?
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, what has changed in your perspective? Because you have the kids that have this beautiful view, but you grew up in the US and then you moved as an adult, as a family man already. So how does it change your view of kind of the world?
I will say, I'll stipulate. I still love the U.S. I mean, I love the people. There's a lot about the U.S. that I really love. I don't love the government. I don't love the loss of freedom. I don't love the kind of the propaganda that it is the end all be all place in the world, because I don't think that it is.
There's a Michael Malice quote that I really love that he says, "I hate the government because I love the people."
Yeah, I still have a ton of friends in the U.S. I like going there. I like traveling there. I just don't like kind of the suffocation and the erosion of our rights as listed in the Constitution. It's just it's really frustrating to me that that's happening, and that's. But what it's given me is I think even now I'm in my mid 50s now, and it's given me certainly an appreciation for other cultures for sure. And there is a lot about Panamanian culture that I really love, and it's very family oriented. It's very personable and social. People get together, and there's a story I like to tell, kind of a compare and contrast story. There's a little town outside of where I live that's it's a small little fishing village, and you drive through it and it's poor, but everybody is outside talking, playing soccer, talking over the fence with their neighbors, walking up and down the street. The only time these people are in their house is when they go in to cook or maybe to go to sleep. When I go back to DC and go to my neighborhood in Northwest Washington, it's a row house. People come home, they park their cars, they walk inside, they shut the door, and they pull down the shades. And it's we wonder why we have such high levels of unhappiness and depression, and it's because it's just way more social here, and people enjoy being with their neighbors, enjoy dining together and things like that, and we've lost so much of that in the U.S., and that's a real tragedy to me.
Yeah, that's I'm never sure what exactly did that to the US. I mean, actually, when I moved to the mountains here, I have there's only like 3 neighbors within walking distance of my house right now. But I'm friends with all of them, and there's a text chain, and we text each other when the bear's walking around, and we have dinner together on the porch sometimes. It's a nice little community. I never had that in Philadelphia when I lived in a big city.
Big cities, I think, are where the problem is the worst. And you may see some of that even in Panama City here, although I think it's less. But out in the provinces, we're about 2 hours outside of Panama City. It's just not the case, man. On the weekends, most people here will go to the river or go to a waterfall and have a barbecue, and there's tons of folks just hanging out and talking and shooting the breeze, and they'll spend all day just enjoying their neighbors. And it's to me, that's what life's all about, and that's one of the big reasons why I love it so much here.
How quickly were you accepted as like a local by the other residents or your neighbors?
I don't know that I am fully accepted. I'm always going to be a gringo.
Sure.
But most of the time it's in good, most of the time it's good natured and it's in good fun. They'll poke fun at me for my Americanisms, which are, especially after I spend 2 weeks up in the US, I'll come back and I'll be stressed out, and, it kind of that level of intensity rubs off on you, and I'll come back down and talk to my friends, and they're like, yeah, you still have, your gringoisms. But generally, people here are very accepting. There's very little anti-American animosity, anti-Americanism, I guess, towards individuals, towards people. Right. There's a lot that people don't like about the long arm of American foreign policy or Americans cracking down on things like banking. But the people are wonderful. They're really accepting, very cool, very laid back, and as I said, muy tranquilo. The one big difference I'll just reminded me of, though, is the culture here is called a mañana culture, which means, yeah, we'll get to it tomorrow. And so traveling as much as I travel back and forth between the U.S., I have to realize, when I touch down in Panama, I got to put the brakes on, mellow out, realize that things aren't going to get done nearly as quick here as they would in the U.S. And that can be a little frustrating at times, but I think compared to the alternative, it's something I'm perfectly willing to accept.
So does that make doing business in Panama hard?
It's harder.
I remember my parents went and visited Belize once, and they came back and said nobody ever does any work. Like they work just enough to get food for the day or the next day, and then they take the next day off.
Yeah, the common refrain here is that people work to live; they don't live to work. And so, yes, doing business here can be more difficult. So coming down here and trying to establish a business and, get your feet on the ground is definitely going to be more difficult, which is why, if you're a remote worker, and you don't have to do that necessarily, but, your clients are, not Panama based, but in the US, it's an ideal situation. You don't have to run into those sorts of things, but yeah, it can be more difficult to do business here because, as you say, the pace of life is just slower.
Yeah. But I agree. That's a great combination. Do your work online in the US and then live that slower lifestyle. So you can mix and match what you want there, it sounds like.
Exactly right.
That's awesome. So before we get out of here, because we've been going almost an hour, minus that one little internet disruption, I guess what are the biggest mistakes you made, or I guess what are the biggest places you would recommend people start researching if they want to really investigate this flag type lifestyle?
Well, I would say search flag theory first, and then just get a kind of a general understanding and background on what five flag theory is, what the advantages of it are. Then I think you'd want to make a decision on whether you're looking to actually get a second passport, which there are some real benefits to, or whether just establishing residency would be enough to serve your purposes. And then what I would do is, I would look at some of the havens that are offering some of the most generous citizenship programs. Panama, I think, is still pretty generous. Uruguay, Paraguay. In Latin America, I'm trying to think of what the other ones are, but there's kind of an up. If you search for it, there's a lot of updated lists on where the really attractive places are for citizenship and residency. And once you've zeroed in on a few places that are interesting to you, there are law firms in most of these countries that can walk you through the process, and they're all English speaking, and most of them have US phone numbers or Skype phone numbers or whatever. And they'll give you a free consultation. They'll walk through with you what the best residency program for your situation might be to come in under. And they can also help you establish bank accounts. And they're generally very good with, all right, here's the paperwork that you need. Here's what you got to fill out. Here's who you have to submit it to. And they're generally pretty reasonable on costs too. We didn't pay thousands and thousands of dollars. I think maybe we paid $1,500, $2,000 for the whole process of establishing residency. So it wasn't expensive.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I guess the last thing I would say is, you definitely want to take a trip and visit the country before you pull the trigger. And I would recommend spending, if you can swing it, 10 days to 2 weeks. And it's a work trip. This is not coming and sitting on the beach and relaxing. You got to hustle. And so when I did it originally, I came down for a week, and then my wife came down for a week. We separately, because we had 3 young kids. I rented a car at the airport. I had a real estate agent with me. I traveled the whole country looking at real estate, met with lawyers. It was very tiring. But you need to make sure, that, it has everything that you're going to need for your personal situation, whether it's, access to healthcare, banking, real estate. If you want to be on the beach, you're going to need to see a lot of different properties. It's a work trip. And that's probably the most tiring part is, taking a trip and just really grinding for, 10 days to 2 weeks to see if is this a place I could actually live?
Yeah. Maybe take 3 weeks then, and one of them could be a vacation.
Yeah, you could do that too.
All right, man, this has been awesome. Is there anything we can promote for you? Anywhere you want to send people?
No, because I'm largely just in private business and do consulting work. A few years ago, we did have we released a book on how to move to Panama, and especially if you have kids. I'm not even sure it's available anymore. So I'm just happy to share with you what I know. And I think I'd like to see more people do it because, the quality of life is pretty amazing.
Well, hey, I might take a trip down to Panama, and if I do, I'll look you up.
Anytime, man.
All right. Thanks so much for doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for the conversation. I really appreciate Coley coming on. He had nothing to promote. It was just a favor to me, and he thought it would be fun to talk about. So big props to Coley. Also, if you want to become more free in your own life, improve your security, your wealth, your awareness, and build a better network, I have a free checklist for you. Just go to henrybing.co/liberty and you can download it. It shows you where you are on the freedom scale and how to attain more of each of those items: security, wealth, awareness, and network. So that's henrybing.co/liberty. All right, see you back here next week.